The legendary Carole King once sang, "Winter, spring, summer, or fall, all you gotta do is call." According to Governor Pritzker, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson is not heeding those words. The mayor worked to defeat a bill the governor backed that would have regulated hemp-derived weed products like Delta 8 and 9. At a feisty press conference this week, Pritzker says he was blindsided and wonders why the mayor never let him know.
Lines of communications are open, but people have to take advantage of the open communication line, and often that didn't happen with regard to the hemp bill. Didn't call anybody in my administration.
In fact, Governor Pritzker says the mayor's reached out in total maybe 5 times over his 2 years in office. It's a curious political strategy, seeing as how Johnson is constantly looking to Springfield for help, first demanding full funding of CPS by getting the state to fork over $1 billion, and for progressive revenue items to help the city's budget. Mayor Johnson says he's spoken to the governor on that last item, but the governor says not so much.
With regard to his budget, literally the last call that we got from them was in September, and then once in December. We by the way, scheduled calls, and then they didn't show up.
So it turns out the mayor's staff is not showing up for meetings and has failed to build meaningful relationships in Springfield. It begs a million questions. Why is the mayor refusing to lobby for the things the city needs and instead choosing to use muscle to oppose what appear to be common sense regulations on an intoxicating substance? You'll hear the mayor's response in a moment. But I should remind everyone it's easier than ever to communicate these days. See, there's this thing called Zoom where you don't even have to leave your living room, and there are these things called cell phones. Turns out you don't even have to call, you could just text. Clearly, the mayor utilizes that function talking to his political godmother, powerful Chicago Teachers Union President Stacey Davis Gates. So why not the governor? I'm not sure if you call out his name wherever he is, he'll come running, but I do know that Chicago needs a friend at the state capitol. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, all the mayor has to do is call, or text, or Zoom. And that's our opening shot.
Coming up on Paris on Politics.
One-on-one with Mayor Johnson. Tough questions on the fate of CPS and his frosty relationship with Governor Pritzker. The hemp debate heats up. Why some city council members want to keep Delta 8 legal and others want it gone. The Sphinx speaks out, recapping Mike Madigan's testimony in his own federal corruption trial. Paris on Politics is next.
This is Paris on Politics from Fox 32 Chicago.
Welcome to Paris on Politics, where we go behind the headlines and beyond the spin. Former House Speaker Mike Madigan shocked the political world this week when he took the stand in his own corruption trial. And the governor, as we mentioned, made waves when he ripped Mayor Johnson for working to defeat those hemp regulations. City Council is also considering banning Delta 8 as well within Chicago city limits. We're going to have much more on all of those items in a minute, but first, we got the chance for a rare one-on-one sit-down with Mayor Johnson this week amid the turmoil at Chicago Public Schools. All of this wrangling comes as Mayor Johnson is officially on leave from CPS, something he was warned by an official could be an ethics problem because he's taking an active role in teacher contract negotiations. I began by asking the mayor why not resign from CPS so as to avoid any conflict of interest.
There is no conflict of interest, much like many other city employees that are on leave, people who are on leave from the fire department, from the police department. I'm on leave from Chicago Public Schools, but there is no economic benefit for me, and there's no conflict of interest there at all.
So there wouldn't be, if you went back to CPS, I mean, if you're advocating for a new contract, you would be paid whatever that new contract calls for.
Yeah, well, there's no job waiting for me right now in the Chicago Public Schools. In fact, I enjoy being the mayor of the city of Chicago, and I'm grateful to have this opportunity. Look, here's what's most important here. You have someone who actually, for the first time in the history of Chicago, a mayor who taught in our public schools, right? So I understand exactly what teachers are experiencing every single day. I'm the first mayor in the history of Chicago to actually believe in the system so much so that I send my own children to our public schools. What I want for my children, what I wanted for my students, that's what I want for every single Chicagoan, from the north end of the city to the southeast end and everywhere else in between. A high-functioning, high-quality, well-funded public education system.
And speaking of what you want with CPS, you have said many times that you never asked CEO Pedro Martinez to resign. You admonished a reporter for suggesting as much, but then there's an email from your deputy mayor, Bridget Early, to some of the old board members saying that it is your desire that Martinez leave by September. So why the discrepancy here?
Here's what my desire is. is to ensure that every single family in the city of Chicago has a high quality public education. That's what my desire has always been, whether as a teacher and of course now as a parent, as someone who benefited from public education. This is what's most important, that every single family can feel absolute, assured, and confident that when their child shows up to a school that is fully staffed and fully resourced. That's what my heart's desire is. That's what the people of Chicago voted for when they voted for a parent and a public school teacher to lead the greatest city in the world.
And CEO Martinez has said that if the district gets saddled with a labor contract that it can't afford, it could jeopardize the quality of the school system and children's access to the things that you want them to have access to. Do you agree with that?
Well, here's what we do agree on, that every single child deserves a classroom that is manageable, right? So small class sizes, that's what parents want. Libraries and librarians, that's what parents want. I know because I'm one of them. Parents want to make sure that their children have a well-rounded, full, rich curriculum that includes after-school activities. We want to make sure that our special education services are fully funded, bilingual education, transportation within our public schools. We have parents who struggle to get their child from one end of the city to the other if a particular school community doesn't offer all of those services. That's what parents want. That's what's most important in this moment. We also know that other administrations took a different route, and it didn't benefit anyone, right? Except for the interests of maybe a handful of corporations. We said that closing schools would fix the finances. That was wrong. We said that taking away teacher raises, that would fix the financing. We said that laying off women, a profession that is 87% women. We said that if we lay them off, that's going to fix the financial situation. It hasn't worked. So here's what we have to do. We have to come together as a city where there's alignment. The Board of Education, the mayor's office, as well as our labor partners, we're all in alignment. And so then we're going to continue to work to make sure that our schools are fully funded. We're going to work together in the state to ensure that bilingual education, transportation, and special education is funded as well. That's what parents want us to do. They want a mayor that's going to stand up and fight for them, and that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Should CTU take the offer that's on the table, I believe, in terms of raises? CPS is offering 18% over 4 years. They're not really specific on staffing levels because CTU had initially asked for 14,000 additional staff members. Should CTU take the deal that's there?
Well, look, there is a great deal of urgency, right, to make sure that we have a contract that reflects the values of all of our parents. But this is not just about raises. I can tell you, as someone who is taught in our elementary schools, this is about respecting teachers and teachers as professionals. There are teachers who struggle to find enough time in between courses and classes to have prep time. That's important. Listen, if I'm a parent and I drop my child off, I want to make sure that that teacher has adequate time to prepare for my child when they come into their classroom. These are things that are important to the people of Chicago.
No doubt that this is your central fight to transform the schools, as you said, but what about your fiduciary duty to the taxpayers who spend 56% of their property tax bill on CPS, an agency that is deeply in debt, that is at risk of going further into debt, a downgraded credit rating it's at risk for. What about your duty to taxpayers?
Yeah, so I do have a duty to taxpayers, and that's why we are working collectively to ensure that our school district is fully funded and we're not just simply relying upon property taxes. Here's what I can say. Previous administrations did not take their fiduciary responsibility as serious as I'm taking. That's why we are in this peril, right? They said we're going to close schools, that's going to fix it. We said we're going to avoid paying people's retirement, that's going to fix it. They said that we're going to privatize our schools, that's going to save money. None of it worked. And so now I've put forth a vision that speaks to the values of parents because I'm one of them, right? While also ensuring that we're protecting taxpayers. We can do both.
I want to transition to that hemp bill, which you lobbied against. This is something the governor had lobbied for, to put regulations on these unregulated hemp Delta 8 products. Did you speak with the governor beforehand about bringing Chicago in and having a seat at the table on this?
Well, let me just say this first of all. The governor and we are aligned as it relates to making sure that there are strict regulations around this particular product. Of course, we want to make sure that we keep people safe, and particularly young people, and preventing young people from getting and gaining access to products that could be harmful, whether that's tobacco, alcohol, or any other substance, right? So we're in agreement there. In fact, during the budget process, as you may know, we put forth a vision and a plan around stricter regulation. Here's all we've said is that we have to be at the table together to ensure that we are maximizing regulations to keep people safe, but also ensuring that local municipalities and stakeholders are part of that process. And so we're going to work with the 104th General Assembly. Our team is going to work with the governor's team, the Speaker of the House, the Senate President, and all of the Chicago delegation who stood up in this moment as well and made sure that their voices were heard on behalf of their constituents. And so that process will begin January 8th, 12:02. Once they're sworn in, we're ready to hit the ground running.
So it sounds like you're going to be talking to the governor's team about this and the General Assembly, but I've heard from sources close to the governor that he feels blindsided. He didn't know that you were going to, make this push. Why pick this fight with the governor who you need on your side, Chicago needs, for added school funding and for progressive revenue?
We're all on the same team, right? No one's picking a fight with anyone. In fact, the governor and I, along with the board president, we worked together, particularly responding to the new arrivals mission when the governor of Texas attacked our city by using human beings. We all came together collectively and rose above those attacks. When the city of Chicago was on display for the world with our Democratic National Convention, it will be the most historic convention, I believe, in our nation's history. We worked together to pull that off. In fact, we're working together around our One System initiative that came out of our new arrivals mission, where we added more beds for families who are struggling with housing. And so there is going to always be a collective response from the governor, myself, the board president, to ensure that working people and our values are always front and center and we are aligned. Look, sometimes within family, we come to slightly different conclusions, but we're all moving towards the same goal, which is to keep people safe, but also to make sure that there's real voice from everyone when it comes to legislation or any other idea. Look, as a middle child, I think I'm actually relatively gifted of working with multiple sides.
Coming up on Paris on Politics.
The hemp debate heats up. Why some city council members want to ban Delta 8 hemp products.
Lou, what you doing?
Hey, Caitlin, I'm looking for this stream everyone's talking about.
Fox Local?
Yeah.
Get me. App Store, download Fox Local, open it, pick Chicago, boom.
Oh, that was easy. Hey, Paris. Hey, I got this stream on my phone finally.
I'm on there.
Everyone's on this thing.
Now you can watch Paris on Politics anytime, anywhere.
Hey, Anita, I'm on Fox Local.
I know, Lou. I watch you on Bears Blitz on Fox Local.
Fox Local. This is big stuff.
Glad I could help.
Delta 8 hemp products were a hot topic in Springfield this week after the governor's bill to institute regulations fell to defeat. This comes after Mayor Brandon Johnson enacted a surprise 11th-hour strategy to lobby lawmakers against the bill. And that's not the end of the debate. Here in City Council, alderpeople are considering multiple ordinances that would either regulate or ban Delta 8 outright. And joining us are 2nd Ward Alderman Brian Hopkins and 6th Ward Alderman William Hall to debate this issue. Thanks, gentlemen, for coming back here.
Thank you so much for having us.
With you, Alderman Hall, you've got an ordinance you're working on that would keep these Delta 8 hemp products legal, but with regulations.
Well, we'll keep the right ones. Number one, for the last 2 months, we've worked with BACP, law enforcement, licensing, to develop a tough regulation plan that includes scammers, 21 and under, no touching it. Any children in the vicinity of it or unpacking it would not be allowed. And coupled with tough fines, not a 1, 2, 3 strike policy, but maybe a 1, 2 policy. And then we move into our open hearing, opening up the conversation on what does a constructive ordinance look like. We can be both ethical as well as sustain our revenue. We want the bad guys out of this stuff. And so third-party testing, again, limits the corruption that identifies those things that our Department of Public Health and our commissioner recommends. And so those are the things that we've been working on consistently for the last 2 months. And I say we're about 70% down the finish line. return with constructive regulation that protects our children.
All right, and for those that don't know, this is stuff that's found at head shops and
Yeah.
gas stations and some convenience stores. Alderman Hopkins, you have an ordinance that would pretty much ban these products in Chicago. Is that the better route to go?
I believe it is. The problem with this is that there isn't a high enough THC content in these Delta-8 products to get you high. That's the reason you buy these products. You want to get that intoxicating feeling. And by federal law, under the definition of what hemp is, there's only a microscopic amount of the psychoactive ingredient, THC.
But these Delta-8 products are getting people high.
And that's the problem. In order to get that high, these products have to be chemically enhanced with synthetic substances. There's no other way to get high when you have a microscopic level of THC in them. So we don't know what's in them. These are synthetic products that are manufactured in illicit laboratories, and there isn't any testing protocol that exists to try and identify what they are. It's a mystery what is in them, and that's what's making people sick.
But one of the things we must consider right now, if you go to a dispensary, you can buy Delta-8 in a dispensary. You can buy these Delta products. And again, we have to look like others who use hemp, not just those that want to get high. You look at our hero, Mongo McMichaels, who uses hemp-derived products to get through his challenges with MS. And so what we want to do is a comprehensive regulation plan. We want the dark guys out. This is a multi-million-dollar industry that is ridding our community with bad players. We want them gone in the city of Chicago. This is the first time in which Chicago won't be exploited, assets won't be sold, and we will actually be a player in an industry that is federally protected. Hemp is federally protected. It's not going anywhere, but we want to protect our children in Chicago.
And that's why Governor Pritzker was looking at a statewide regulatory framework on these products, because they basically came in, Alderman Hopkins, and started selling stuff similar to cannabis. And the legal cannabis providers had to get licenses. They had to spend millions of dollars on capital. They have to go through strict testing requirements. So it's almost like Uber coming in and disrupting taxi. Is it fair that these other operators come in without having to do any of that?
No, it isn't fair, because we put a lot of thought into the legal cannabis industry, which is not an old industry. It was created, just a few years ago, really. It's less than a decade old. So there was a lot of forethought into the regulatory environment. Everything about the legal cannabis industry is highly scrutinized, is subject to testing, laboratory tests, all sorts of things happen. So when you go into a dispensary and you make a purchase at a licensed dispensary, you know that that product has been carefully scrutinized from the planting in the greenhouse to the distribution to the manufacture and having it wind up on the shelf. The opposite is true in the Delta-8 industry. It's not tested, it's not studied, it's not regulated, and we don't even know what's in it, but we do know it makes people sick.
And that's where we want to add the truth. The truth of the matter is, number one, the last 2 to 3 months, exactly what he said is what we've been putting forth with the support of our legal counsel. Again, we see states.
A testing framework?
Absolutely. It's a testing framework, third party, in which the city has nothing to do with it. And if you want a license, you have to go through some of the toughest regulations to do it. Secondly, we want to mirror a tax revenue similar to cannabis. We're not trying to oversaturate the
How much tax revenue
market.
do you think a city can get?
Currently, I think we should start at 38%, the same as cannabis. We're not trying to carve out a lane for cheap weed. What we want is a lane that is sustainable but protected regulatory. And this is the reason why we look at cannabis, we look at tobacco. We've added both of those regulatory practices in which it's been protected under the law so far with our general counsel, BACP, enforcement. They support this so far. And again, the third party element in which, again, you take out the corruption, you take away the flash passing of bad licensing, and you make them go through a process in which they pay for it.
Governor Pritzker wanted to put statewide regulations. Mayor Johnson, in the 11th hour, kind of called some lawmakers to defeat it. Why do you think the mayor would do this, use his capital in Springfield? Because now the governor's saying he doesn't really call him very much, but on this issue, he went against the governor.
Well, I'm not sure how much political capital the mayor actually spent. It was really the speaker who stopped the vote from happening. Whether he had a conversation with the mayor, only those two gentlemen know. But I don't think the mayor really did spend a lot of political capital on it. He did take a clear position after the announcement was made that there wouldn't be a vote, and I disagree with his position. Now, whether he's going to be active in Springfield if we try to get another vote in the House later remains to be seen. But clearly, there's already a regulatory environment that exists for legal legal cannabis. We don't have to invent another one. If these products wanted to be folded in to the existing regulatory environment, I think we'd probably allow that.
How about have the exact same rules for them as for
if we follow the same rules, African Americans would be cut out again. If we follow the same rules,
are you saying these are mostly
again? This is the issue
businesses?
that we have with cannabis right now. This is an opportunity to reconcile, repent, and change from the bad practices that came in with cannabis.
The state bill wasn't going to ban hemp; it was going to put those kinds of regulations. So what's wrong with that?
But at the end of the day, let's look at a fair distribution. When we look at 38% potentially for flower-like substances in hemp, 15 to the state, 15 to the city, and then an 8% investment in Cook County healthcare, which has carried this city and carried the county and the state through some tough times. This is sustainable, and again, we get the regulatory advice from our Cook County healthcare. We add other healthcare partners. Our commissioner is great, and we can sustain something to the future. Right. Chicago needs to finally play ball and do business in a regulatory sustainable way.
The bottom line, Paris, is these hemp-derived products under the broad category of Delta-8 are synthetic chemicals manufactured in illicit laboratories, and they are harmful substances. They're making kids sick. They're marketed towards children with these cartoon characters to try and mimic candy and other products that kids are familiar with. And hold on, and they're dangerous products. So to tax them to try and generate revenue would be akin to taxing ecstasy or K2 or club drugs or even heroin or fentanyl. These are harmful, illegal substances, and we shouldn't be certifying them. We shouldn't be manufacturing them, and we shouldn't be allowing people to cause harm by taking them.
Again, that's narrative that's clickbait. Number one, we're reading that in our ordinance. We are going after those who are using illegal packaging, using it in facilities where kids are present. And again, we have the 21 and under scanning machine, which is actually supported by tobacco.
It could make you sick when you're 22 years of age, just as easy as it can 18. These are dangerous, illegal products.
Going to a dispensary buying 54% THC with nobody telling you how much you can buy is dangerous.
This is a very passionate debate. We'll see where this goes.
We'll find the middle. I trust it.
All right, we'll see that. All right, Alderman Hopkins, Alderman Hall, thanks for being here.
Coming up on Paris on Politics.
The Sphinx speaks out. Mike Madigan's testimony in his own federal corruption trial.
This weekend, kick back and catch up with Fox 32 on Fox Local. Recap the week's must-know news.
This weekend, you're going to be dealing with a lot of closures downtown.
Relive Fox 32's best.
He's not just coming at you, he's coming at you with something that he just caught.
Plus the latest political and sports buzz.
Is this a role that you like, kind of going on the attack?
There's plenty of excitement here.
Watch live or anytime on demand. Weekends at Fox 32 on Fox Local. Download now on these streaming services.
The viewer in the morning really needs to have a good feeling for what it's going to be like for the rest of the day.
I've got 3 kids myself, so I set out their clothes Monday through Friday, which you can do too based on our 7-day forecast. The last thing that you want to have to think about is, what is my kid going to be wearing to school? What do I need in the morning?
Having grown up here, having spent about 30 years in this market predicting the weather, you not only get really familiar with the weather, but with the needs of your audience. And that's what it means to be the weather authority.
All you wanted to know about the complex inner workings of Mike Madigan's Springfield from the man himself. Former House Speaker Madigan, accused in a massive racketeering and bribery case involving ComEd, has spent 2 days now on the witness stand, so far taking questions from his attorney and that of co-defendant Mike McLean. In a second, why a former federal prosecutor tells us he thinks this is a high-wire strategy. But first, this background. Madigan spent the morning testifying about his relationship with former Chicago alderman and key government witness Danny Solis, who wore a wire. Prosecutors have alleged Solis acted as a go-between, helping secure business for Madigan's tax appeal law firm in exchange for official government acts. Regarding a development in the West Loop, Solis tells Madigan the developer understands how this works, quote, the quid pro quo. Madigan testified he reacted to that statement with surprise and concern and had a face-to-face meeting with Solis saying he would not be involved in a quid pro quo. Madigan says he had planned to recommend Governor Pritzker appoint Solis to a state government board, but decided not to once he learned through the media Solis was in legal trouble. Later, Madigan answered questions from the attorney for co-defendant Mike McLean, accused of acting as Madigan's political fixer. Madigan acknowledged McLean was a lobbyist for ComEd, a friend, and a political advisor. At the heart of the corruption case, allegations that ComEd bribed Madigan through McLean with no-work jobs for Madigan friends in exchange for Madigan's support on key legislation. Quote, did you ever agree to exchange some jobs at ComEd for official action you would take to help ComEd legislation? McCain's lawyer asked. Quote, the answer is no, Madigan answered. Quote, did you ever actually take any official action to benefit a piece of ComEd-supported legislation because of any job that ComEd may have given to somebody you referred to Mike McLean? Madigan answers, no. And right now I want to bring in former federal prosecutor and current attorney with King and Spalding, Patrick Collins, who was taking in some of the proceedings this morning. So Madigan, a risky strategy here for the defense. On the witness stand, we've heard this from public officials. I did everything above board. If people below me were doing things nefariously, well, I didn't know about it. Does that go over with the jury?
I guess we'll see on cross-examination, Paris. I thought what was most interesting this morning was basically Madigan threw Mr. McLean under the bus. He's basically said all those tapes the jury heard that sound really bad, that was McLean freelancing. That was McLean doing his own thing. Now, Mr. McLean's lawyer is now cross-examining Madigan, and he's got a very difficult job because if he says, wait a minute, Mr. Madigan, my guy was doing it all at your request, then he's effectively admitting part of the scheme, and we're not seeing that. We're seeing Mr. Cotter, the lawyer for Mr. McLean, sort of going around the edges of this. So it's a very difficult position for Mr. McLean to be in, but Mr. Madigan very plainly said that the worst of the tapes that the jury heard, that's all Mr. McLean. That's not me, Mr. Madigan.
So a clear strategy of throwing Mr. McLean under the bus, who Madigan admitted in testimony he's known for 40 years. He's been a friend. He's sought advice from. He's sought jobs from. When you look at the recordings here, the Burke case, the Blagojevich case hinged on these recordings. Do you hear a bombshell recording with Madigan? And is that going to be a problem if there isn't one?
I don't think it's a problem. It's why Mr. Madigan, I think, is allowed to take the stand, whereas Mr. Burke couldn't because the tapes were so bad with Mr. Burke's voice. Mr. Madigan's voice is only on a handful of tapes, very small tapes, no smoking gun. So the McLean issue is really a central issue here. Was McLean working at Madigan's direction, or was McLean a free agent? And I think that's, when you hear the cross-examination from the prosecutor, he's going to be focused in on that area. Because if the jury believes McLean was freelancing, Madigan's free. If the jury believes McLean, this 40-year friend, was doing things at the behest of Mr. Madigan, we have a whole different story.
That's our show for this week. Be sure to stay up to date with Fox 32 Chicago on air and online, as well as the Fox local app. Stay warm, and so long, everyone.